Previously on Sustainable Talks with Sion.
In this case study, I will
Previously on Sustainable Talks with Sion.
Into urban, lower-income communities. The belief is that sustainable practices could change the dynamics of society and the conditions of ULI communities for the better. As the correlation between impoverishment and health, both planet and people, are made, engineering will be at center stage, though it will require an interdisciplinary solution to better engineer society. Within the past few years, I found a growing need for sustainable practices within the ULI communities around NCA&T. The lack of these practices is evident in the community's health. These communities are affected by poor food options, food swamps, the lack of adequate trash allocation and recyclability, and poor emergency management. This case will touch on details within each course of ESH. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Sion Heck, your resident mesh student. I know it's been a while since my last video, and over the last few months, my project has taken a few turns, which are neither good nor bad. But it's definitely been a unique journey, to say the least. The last time we spoke, I gave you all an overview of my case study project. At that time, I envisioned this grandiose study that will hit on all sectors within sustainability. While that's still my goal, I had to scale the project down to ensure effectiveness. My new case study discourse focuses on improving the conditions of the ULI community surrounding North Carolina A&T State University using sustainable food practices. Here, I acknowledge that the abundance of unhealthy foods and the lack of access to healthy foods contributes to poor community dynamics. The goal is still to use sustainability as a tool for building community resilience and reducing its vulnerability. In our current course of Sustainable Energy, ESH 520, one of our goals is to develop an energy audit in a practical scenario. At first, I struggled with this task, simply because it was difficult for me to envision sustainable energy within my updated project's context. But as I sat and thought about it, I came across a way to implement sustainable energy measures into my project. For me to establish sustainability throughout the project, I must ensure that my suggested solutions consider planetary health. So, I found that applying sustainable energy methods to one of my food solutions provides quality assurance, which is developing a sustainable project. That said, I chose to examine the energy usage of a community's garden food storage shed. In short, this garden would provide community members with fresh, healthy, and affordable foods. The shed would act as both a storage and a hub for community members and workers. For some context, the garden shed information is as follows. Its dimensions are 12 by 24 feet, roughly 288 square footage. The contents within this shed will be kept to a minimum and include 3 28 cubic Samsung refrigerators, 1 Vornado Velocity space heater, and a set of Honeywell LED lights. It's interesting to think that before conducting an energy audit, I failed to realize the amount of energy used for simple operations, even if those operations are conducted on the basis of sustainability. Once again, I discovered the importance of critical assessment. This audit revealed to me the necessary energy required to operate a food storage and allowed me to compare conventional usage to efficient measures, which I find is important when developing just systems. This brings me to my next topic, but before I get into that, let me discuss the 3 significant contributors to energy consumption. I found that the primary contributor to energy consumption was heating. I know heating is important for ensuring comfort, but it takes a significant amount of energy to heat a small area. Energy efficiency can be met if an area is properly insulated. Insulation reduces the frequency of heater usage within those frigid months. Equally, insulation will also ensure energy efficiency for the following energy consumer: refrigeration. I found that not all foods require refrigeration, but if stored in cool spaces, could be preserved just as effectively. Thus, reducing the number of refrigerators in use will lower energy consumption. And there are food preservation methods that will also discourage refrigeration energy usage. The last contributor to energy consumption is operating hours. Notice, operating hours may vary. I finally understand this meaning. Energy consumption, which is tied into business expenses, is dependent on operating hours. In the example of the community garden, calculating crop yield would determine shed hours operations, and with this information, I could create a schedule to reduce energy usage. What makes or how do I ensure my project is centered around justice? Going back to what I was saying about comparing consumption to efficiency, I want to highlight that efficiency is parallel to conservation. Simply put, conservation is the idea of using less, in this case energy, than is required for basic operation. Why is this important for justice? Well, to understand its role in ensuring justice, let us examine the root of the problem. Globally, ULI communities suffer from the adverse conditions that are created from poor community resilience. Poor community resilience is developed from a myriad of factors, including poor health, education, infrastructure, and financial stability. The lack of these qualities increases vulnerability. Without them, communities receive the full load that arrives with negative planetary health and climate change. I know what you're thinking. How does conservation factor into the justice equation? Look at it this way. Overconsumption, which is fed from capitalism, is a predominant constituent in adverse planetary health formation. The more we consume, the greater we contribute to climate change. I find that global South communities who lack the ability to engage in overconsumption usually suffer the most from failing planetary health. Similarly, vulnerable communities within the global North suffer the consequences of consumption engagement, though they also contribute to poor consumer behaviors. So, by partaking in conservation methods, we can do our part as primary consumers to reduce environmental degradation. And I believe sustainability is a tool we use for reduction and restoration. Within the same context, justice and planetary health are one and the same. They both focus on balancing the health between ecosystems and organisms. With this ideology in mind, my goal is to improve ULI conditions using sustainable food practices. And I will do this without increasing or contributing to further environmental degradation. I'll meet these conditions by not inducing climate change, rising global temperatures, or reducing perishable resources. Furthermore, social justice, integrity, and positive planetary health are the primary motivators for this project. A significant portion of ensuring justices is identifying the prospective justices. How, who, or what is benefiting and or burdened by these systems. Within our energy systems, justice seeks to equally distribute benefits and burdens. To achieve this equilibrium, we utilize 4 justice principles. They are 1. Distributional justice. This principle focuses on injustices regarding the physical benefits and risk of energy systems, such as the location of production facilities or access to energy services. 2. Procedural justice. Procedural justice calls for equal and fair decision making. The goal of this principle is to ensure that everyone involved in the system, regardless of social status, income, or race, participates in decision making processes. From my perspective, procedural justice provides communities with the opportunity to shape their environment in cases where they are typically overlooked. 3. Recognition justice. Recognition justice seeks to identify which part of society is affected by injustices. This principle is about recognizing and addressing the needs of these marginalized groups. 4. Restorative justice. Lastly, restorative justice aims to restore harm done to the victims without shifting the focus on the offender. This principle is exceedingly important for ensuring justice throughout the energy system's lifespan. We were asked to identify the 4 justice principles for our energy audit scenario. The purpose of this identification is to understand where within our projects we could improve, and if any, how can these injustices be remediated. That said, I've identified the following implications. 1. Within my energy audit, I chose to address the storage shed's energy consumption. Here, I noted that energy efficiency and conservation is required to prevent further environmental degradation, which, by the way, is linked to ULI conditions. So, the distributional justice implications are centered around reducing conventional energy usage that disproportionately affects ULI communities. 2. My energy scenario suggests that community consensus is required for garden operations. This means that the type of crops grown, the amount needed, and crop prices depend on community engagement, which acts as my main procedural implications. 3. Perhaps the greatest justice implication for my entire project is recognition justice. Identifying underserved, overlooked, and marginalized groups within cities' demographics help me comprehend ULI conditions, and with that comprehensive knowledge, I can develop a framework to effectively implement sustainable solutions. 4. As MES students, my cohort and I are committed to the restoration and balancing of all systems. We seek to improve quality of life while maintaining and repairing natural ecosystems. This creed remains constant throughout my project and is reflected in my audit scenario with the introduction of renewable devices. Essentially, my preferred energy source for the scenario's energy system would be provided by a combination of solar energy and methane capture. I believe these systems are vital for maintaining efficient systems and for reducing environmental degradation. Sounds great, right? To avoid any biases, I asked 2 of my critical friends to chime in on these implications. Here's what they said. 1. The distribution of indicators for my project in part should focus on allocation. Allocation of healthy foods, clean energy, education, and funds. They noted that access to these factors supports equity and resilience, and I agree. A primary indicator for distributional justice must focus on ULI community access. In comparison to my observation, this indicator provides further context for distributional justice. 2. We all agree that community engagement is paramount for achieving procedural justice. One friend noted that conducting monthly meetings to discuss the project's solution and context would benefit in creating a fair decision-making process. And my other friend suggests community inclusion could be provided through introducing a democratic decision-making process. 3. Again, my friends and I came to the same conclusion with our observation. Recognition justice is extremely important for my project's implementation. In recognizing that communities lack access to distributional indicators should be the objective. 4. I believe one of my friends' observation was spot on. They mentioned that instead of restoring systems, my project should focus on restoring self-sufficiency over community dynamics. In the same sense, they're speaking of building community resilience, which is fundamental for proper restoration. Now that I've identified the 4 justice principles within my scenario, the question of who is responsible for addressing these issues remains. It's best to conduct a stakeholder analysis to better understand this question. I must look at which entities possess influence and which entities possess importance. The party that exudes both qualities should be the primary addresser of these injustices. With that in mind, the following parties should address these issues. 1. In this case, the researcher, me, should be the primary addresser of these issues. I'm responsible for educating the community about these injustices so that they can identify the specific injustices that are occurring in their communities. 2. Government officials. Government officials aren't ignorant of the situation, and in fact, are addressing these issues in other affluent communities. Energy policies that focuses on reliable, clean, and safe production should be the primary focus for improving conditions in ULI communities. 3. Energy corporations. Energy companies work hand in hand with the government and are responsible for providing energy to all communities regardless of socioeconomic status. The responsibility of clean energy transition lies in the hands of energy companies. 4. Community members. Community members are responsible for inciting change. Change doesn't occur within the community if members are not engaged in activism. And engagement is essential to ensuring that changes made are centered around justice. Overall, the energy audit scenario laid the foundation for justice implementation for my MESH case study project. This audit taught me how to identify the various justice indicators, which I find will assist me in pushing my project into sustainable measures. I'm a firm believer that sustainability cannot be met without considering justice. Both seek to balance planetary health with human development and advancement. Remember, my project's goal is to improve ULI conditions using sustainable food practices, and I will achieve this without increasing or contributing to further environmental degradation. I'll meet these conditions by not inducing climate change, rising global temperatures, or reducing perishable resources. Furthermore, social justice, integrity, and positive planetary health are the primary motivators for this project. So, I'll leave you all with this. Do you believe justice is necessary to ensure sustainability? If so, can we continue to strive for planetary health without addressing the fundamental injustices? Thanks for listening to me ramble. Until next time, my friends.